All right, welcome to My Line of Work. Here we dive deep into the world of work, what people do, why they do it, and how they got there. From dream jobs to unexpected paths, every story matters, and every career has a story worth sharing. My name is Luis Chavez, and we have a special guest, Michael Mancha. You might remember him from our nonprofit episode. He's also a pastor, and so we're going to interview him today about that line of work. And so let's get right into it. Question 1. How did you first feel called to ministry? Was there a pivotal moment that led you there?
Well, I grew up in the church, and so I always had, I was just like, grew up in the faith and grew up in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always part of it. I had family members that were, church leaders and pastors and stuff. And I don't know that there was a specific like call to like pastoral ministry. I think there was, the more that I grew up in my faith, like when I was in high school and like out of high school, I think that's kind of when I started to see like the potential that this is something that I could want to do or do. I still didn't really know a lot about it. Like really like in and out. I mean, I knew what a pastor is, but to me, a pastor was just the person that I saw on the church
stage.
service.
Yeah.
So I think there was an interest. It just kind of evolved that way.
Yeah.
That I just saw myself as like somebody that loved the church and wanted to see the church succeed.
Mm-hmm.
I was always involved in church, whether it was playing music or even to some degree like preaching in church. And so I think it was just kind of like a slow burn to where I finally realized like I think this is something that I would want to do. And try. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any like mentors or people that influenced you in that direction? Or voluntold you to preach?
Well, that funny story, I think I told you this story before, just like casually, but I remember when I was like 15, probably. We grew up in a really small church.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't, it was just a small kind of rural church. And my grandfather at the time was kind of the leader, pastor. My uncle was as well. They kind of shared that role anyways. But, and I just remember being one day, he was just like, after a church service, he just came up to me. I was like 15, and he was like, "Hey, we want you to preach a sermon in like a month or whatever." Nice. And so, we'll help you, and your dad can help you, and this stuff like that. But just be ready, because in a month you're gonna give the sermon.
Wow, 15,
which I would not. That's something I would not do. Like that is a terrible way to like prepare people for ministry. But it's a small church and his family mostly, so that was one way. But I did have a lot of people in my life from that moment where I was in adolescence and teenage years.
Yeah.
When I went to high school, people, because I went to a very specific high school, it was a Christian high school. And so there was people in there, men that were mentors of mine. And then there was specific people who were pastors, I think, who kind of just became mentors of mine from the time I was 18 years old. Yeah. Just kind of seeing the work that they did and, but also were very pastoral towards me. Yeah. And so then that gave me an idea of like what this means and what it actually feels like to be pastored by someone rather than just seeing somebody on stage. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely had like multiple people. And to this day, I would say maybe 2 or 3 of those are still people that I would consider pastoral mentors or mentors of mine still even to this day.
Okay. And I know you mentioned when you were younger, a pastor to you was just kind of the person on stage or, the leader of the church per se. I did an interview with a firefighter and I asked him what his day-to-day looked like and how much of it was actually fighting fires. Yeah. And he gave me an interesting statistic. He said probably about 20% of his job was fighting fires. Yeah. Even though his job title is firefighter. A lot of it was medical. I mean, 80% of what he does is like medical and responding to emergency calls. Response, yeah. And so I thought that was interesting. And so I know a lot of people think pastors and they think preaching. But what scope of, kind of what do you do other than preach?
I mean, that's an interesting question because I have a full-time job, and so I serve as a pastor. I guess it would be considered part-time, but by any, I guess, normal calculation of what part-time is, it's kind of hard to quantify it.
Yeah.
But because it's just kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when you think of a pastor, you don't really think of the person that you see on the weekend on stage.
Yeah.
And this is the person that is the pastor, right? But two things. One, practically speaking, that's like the firefighter. It's not. That's 45 minutes of one day.
Yeah.
That some of that, a lot of time goes into preparing for that. But I think a majority of my time as a pastor is spent talking. It's just being with people. Yeah. It's either one-on-one conversations, lunch with people, going to people's houses and hanging out, doing things together as friends, even as, or visiting people's families, like just making connection with you. I think that's the majority of what I do as a pastor is just talking to people and just engaging with people. And then there's like administrative work. There's always administrative work kind of that happens. You're part of a church board. You discuss finances. You do things like that. And then there's crisis management. There's people that will call you to let you know when things are bad. Not necessarily because you can do anything about it. Yeah. But just they feel the trust and need to let you know, to inform you. Yeah. They ask you for prayer. They ask you for wisdom. They ask you for help even sometimes. I said two things. The second thing I would say is, from a biblical perspective, the word pastor is a word that is like a shepherd, right? And so there's nothing really about a pastor necessarily that is supposed to be preaching and teaching. I think in our modern culture, the pastor is like, that's one of the main things that identifies a pastor, is he's a good preacher. But biblically speaking, when you look at people who are supposed to be preaching and teaching in the church, it's pastors and elders, right? There's like people who share that role, right? Yeah. So I think that's something we kind of have to like back away from and think like, yes, that's something I do, but it actually shouldn't be the main focus of what I do. Yeah. Right. And it really isn't. You. No. Yeah. And it's like, I think people see that and understand that. But it's not necessarily something that I'm just like, this is what a pastor does. There's that like the, your firefighter friend, it's the same thing. It's like such a small portion of what I do, Is
there something that you do that would surprise the congregation or someone that doesn't know the pastor role that deeply?
I think there's a lot of things that pastors do that just they don't tell people. Like, like they see things that can be done in the church and they're small. Yeah. And so they just do it. Right. Like me personally, like we have an email newsletter that goes out to our congregation. Yeah. And I, in my profession, do marketing communications. Yeah. And it's just very natural for me. Super easy for me to do. It takes me half an hour out of one day a week. Okay. And I do that, right? Yeah. And most people would be like, oh, somebody else probably does that. Yeah. And I think there's probably pastors out there that there's little things that they do that they're just like, you do that? And like, it's not a big deal. You know what I mean? Just could be anything, it could be they buy the coffee, they, go get these special coffee beans that they love and they bring them to the church and something like that. You never know. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there something that in your role that brings you the most fulfillment?
It is people. Like, I think that sounds like very like nice and sweet and that's great. Right. But that's really true. Right? It's really true. Like I love my, the time that I get to spend with people. Yeah. From anywhere from being able to connect with people one-on-one and like hear them if they're going through struggles, and then just having fun with people. Like just like, my family connects with another family and we just hang out as people and we just have friendship. Like those things are, I just like being with people. Like that brings me a lot of joy. On the days where we have church, that's a long day, right? I wake up early. It's preaching. It's a lot of involvement, and then a lot of talking, a lot of people. And I usually don't want to like go home and rest. I usually want to just like keep hanging out.
Yeah.
All the way to like late, and then I get home and I crash. But that is, as busy as that is still a very restorative time for me.
That's good.
Yeah.
What about the opposite? What are some challenges that you specifically, or just pastors in general, face that people don't know or are not aware about?
This is going to get, I think, a little deep, but I think something that, in my experience, a lot of pastors that I talk to would agree with me is that pastoral ministry, even though you're not alone, like you have tons of people around you all the time, it's very lonely, because it's a work that you alone carry a certain level of, like, you just kind of know, like, you just know everybody's. I mentioned earlier, like, people sometimes will just call me to let me know that, their dad's in the hospital. Right? There's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing they expect me to do about it. But pray for them, support them, know that, and be there if necessary, whatever. But they just feel the trust to be like, I want to let my pastor know that my dad's in the hospital, or that, my husband lost his job, and so there's just a lot of that knowledge. Like, you just kind of look around and you're like, you kind of know what everybody's going through. You know what everyone's struggling with, the wins that people are having, because people will do that too. It's like, oh, this happened, and I'm so proud, and I can pray for people or whatever. And so just having that knowledge, and I think it's a burden that I carry gladly. It's not anything that I do it, that I don't like that part of it. Like, but it's definitely, because you just kind of know things, and you just kind of, you are the person in a lot of places where you're the trusted one, or you're the one that are confided in. And so I am saying you're not alone. Yeah. But it can be lonely, because you're just,
I know what you mean. Because I go to church, and it's just, I see the best of everyone, right? Yeah. They put their best foot forward. They're dressed and they're smiling, and how you doing? Oh, I'm blessed, and I've had a good week, and everything's good, right? For the most part, right? That's what people present at a church service. And then you get that same presentation, but you also know, behind this, I'm doing well. Like, but I also shared with you last week that, so and so, and this, and I'm going through this, and so I could see the loneliness in that, or the isolation in that, where you can't just go and share, hey man, I need to, get this off my chest.
Sometimes you just kind of carry it, and you just own it, and that's okay. Not to get too like spiritual or anything, but I think that's something that God prepares you for. And pastoral ministry isn't, like a lot of different professions, it's not for everybody. And so, but I think those who are called into that, God prepares them, and God guards their heart in a way where that's not something that overwhelms me. It's not something that like I lose control of, and I start taking it out on my family or something. What I mean? It's a burden that you carry. And at the same time, and I think most pastors would agree, I live the same way, where I've got healthy outlets for that. Like, I've got people that I would consider pastoral over me, that I can go to and say, this is going on, and I need advice, or just having a hard week, man, and this is going on in the church, and they're going to hear me, and they're going to carry it, right? They're going to carry it with confidence and with privacy. And so that's healthy. It's healthy to have those outlets, and to know that, that way you're not just literally just carrying it, and then you have nothing else. Right? So,
I don't want to stay too negative, but on that same note, are there, how do you handle, because even though there are private struggles, and you know about those more than anyone in the church, what about the public, what would you call it? Conflicts, right? Is there, those tough conversations? There's people that come to church, and they just, they vocalize their, I don't agree with this, or
complaints.
how How do you process that?
So there's two things that I mean, I think I could give you a general answer, but I'm going to be more specific. And I think there's two things that I've learned over the years.
Yeah.
One of those is that you're not going to escape it.
Yeah.
Like if you feel like you're going to have a church, that's going to be a healthy environment and stuff, you're not going to get away from it. Like there's going to be people who have complaints that don't like what you do. You can work really hard on a sermon and really feel strong about it, and you can deliver it and it can feel really great. And there's going to be one person that's not going to like something you said.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like it's it's going to be there, right? I think those are they just come with having public I guess not public profession, but a level of your profession that is public.
Yeah.
Right. Or that is visible, highly visible, you know? But the second thing I would say is this, and this was something that I learned from a church that I served at, and there was an older man. He was one of the elders.
Yeah.
And he would always tell me, he told me this from the very, very beginning. And he always told me that he was going to be upfront with me because he didn't want me to get blindsided by things. So if he knew something was going on, he was going to tell me. If he knew something didn't look right, he was going to confront me about it because he didn't want it to come from someone way over here and be like, you know, I have a problem with the pastor because he's this, you know.
Yeah.
He always want to make sure I knew everything about it.
Yeah.
But he told me this thing where he said that churches or pastors have to be okay. Churches, pastors and elders, anybody that leads a church, they have to be okay with using the phrase coming from them as the pastor to a congregant, like using the phrase, this might not be the place for you. Because I think the goal of some pastors sometimes is as a shepherd to like grow the flock, right? And to bring people into faith, to bring people into the church. And if you believe in the church that you lead and in the community that you have, then you're going to really believe wholly that like this could be a place for them to grow.
Yeah.
Like they could find community here. They can find companionship, friendship, relationship. They can find it here. And you believe that with your heart. But there are people who are going to come into a congregation, whether they're visiting or they're trying it or whatever the thing may be. And they're going to realize, or you're going to see that this might not be a good place for them.
Yeah.
They might feel better somewhere else, or you can see that they want something that you're not going to be able to provide in this church. You know, it could be something as, you know, super serious or deep, but it could be something as simple as like, for example, in our church, like we don't have a big young adult presence. Right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of kids, we have a lot of youth, we have a lot of adults. At some point, all those youth are going to become young adults, so we will eventually.
Yeah.
But right now, we don't. And so if you have a young couple that comes in, or even an older couple and they have an older, you know, or you've got someone that comes in and they're in their 20s and they're looking for that young adult connection.
Yeah.
You know, sadly, I'd be like, hey, you know, there's lots of people here, but if you're looking for that, like, I'm not sure this might be a good place for you because we're still growing now. We still don't have that, right? And that's okay, right? I don't want to keep people in the church for the sake of keeping them. And so if someone on the other side, right, that has like lots of complaints or they're conflicting with people and they're causing a lot of problems and they're just also having those conversations to be like, you know, this community is for you.
Yeah.
But if you just seem to have a lot of problems with people and the way we're doing things and what I'm saying and what's going on, then maybe this isn't a good place for you. Like you want to be somewhere where you're actually gonna be set up to succeed and like grow. And if it doesn't feel that way for you, then it's okay. Like you can, you know, and if there's conflicts, you know, say between members and you help them work that out, you know, and you can't be conflict averse. Like you have to be okay with difficult conversations and having those conversations.
Yeah.
And you might see people that resolve conflict and move on and they're great, right? They're not going to see eye to eye, but at least they know there's no conflict and there's love and they can work together in that. But every once in a while, and sometimes people just, you know, they want to have a problem and it's, you just have to be okay with being like, you know, this might not be a good place for you, and that's okay. You know, there are other places that would be better for you, I think, and maybe you should try those out because this isn't it. You know. Yeah,
and I think that's part of. You mentioned earlier being a shepherd. I think that's part of protecting. You know, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to a little more positive. You mentioned when you were 15, you had a month to prepare for a sermon. You don't have a month to prepare for every sermon. Do you have a process that you follow? How is sermon preparation for you?
Yeah. If, for anybody that watches it, if you're in church or you go to church or you've been involved in a church, you might be a part of a church that teaches out of like a series format, right? Where they're either studying through a book of the Bible or they're studying a particular topic, and they have all these different parts of that topic. And that's a good method for teachers, in the school system, right? If you're
like
you have units,
unit.
right? You have units. If you're teaching history, you're teaching, blocks or whatever. And that works a lot with churches, I think, and especially the way that teaching formats work, because you're able to concentrate on to specific subject matter or books of the Bible. I know in our church, we kind of alternate between subject matter in terms of like that's topical, like, we might talk about relationships. We might talk about margin. We might talk about certain things in Scripture that, topics in Scripture that we might discuss. And then we also will do books of the Bible. So we'll actually read through a whole book, and we'll actually preach through an entire book and read it and study it and seek to understand the whole context of the book. And so doing that helps to prepare, right?
Yeah.
So if you know you're talking specifically about relationships, then you might think, okay, what subject matter can we talk about? Right? We can talk about marriage, we can talk about friendship, we can talk about broken relationship, we can talk about parent to kids, we can talk about fixing relationships, all the different types. And then you can plan out, and then you kind of have an idea what you're doing. Same with if you're teaching through a book of the Bible, you kind of break it down, and okay, this is going to take us 2 months to study through this.
Yeah.
And then when you do that, you know what you're studying for the week. I know what I'm preaching about that week. And so I would say if in my time as a pastor, there was a time when I was a full-time pastor, and that obviously gives you more time to study during the week, prepare, do a little bit of reading and stuff. As a person who serves bivocationally as a pastor, you kind of have to I kind of break it down, and like I know what I'm talking about. So I kind of, from the very beginning of the week, I'm trying to get my head into that space where I'm thinking about this material. Like if we're talking about a certain subject that happens to be that week, and so I might be looking for material. I might be reading in it, and then I just kind of start formulating ideas as the week goes by. And I'm not really mapping those down. This is my method. I mean, everybody's different, but like, I might be talking those out to myself or talking with somebody and be like, hey, what do you think about this and that? And I'm not really like saying, I'm going to preach about this. What does it sound like to you? I might just like bring it up, be like, hey, like, what do you think when somebody does X, Y, and Z? Right?
Yeah.
And they might like give me their feedback, and I kind of play that out.
Yeah.
And then usually by the end of the week, by Friday, and that's kind of when I'm sitting down to actually kind of do the work at the computer to be like, let me organize my thoughts into how this works. And usually by, there's a little bit more that goes into it in the morning of, kind of sit down in the morning and think through it again and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of a long week. I mean, there's like long-term planning that we try to do. And then every week, but every week you can't, I'm not working on 2 weeks from now sermon this week. I'm doing this week's sermon is this week, And I think that's common for a lot of pastors. I think ideally you want to just be like way ahead and stuff. And to be honest with you, if it's a pastor of like a really large mega church where they have staff, they have pastoral staff, they might have research teams that are helping them formulate their, do all the research and like sum up this article or sum up this book, and then I can take from that and do stuff. But definitely don't have that.
No. Is there something that you can share as far as advice for someone that may be listening that, hey, I want to better prepare sermons or just, tweak my process?
Yeah.
Is there something specific that you've learned, right, on whether it be like the thematic unit prep or the week to week prep? Is there something that you can say, hey, this helps me, or this is a resource that I use, or
I think trying to think about it thematically. Like if you're doing a series, a long, topic, then kind of think about it and try to get it. I try to get that done in one. Like I don't try to prolong it. Like, okay, we're gonna like at our church we just preached through Nehemiah. Right? I don't try to like, okay, I want to preach through Nehemiah. Let me think about it for a week. Right? I literally will sit down and be like, let me break this down right now. Right? Because it's all right in your head. You can map it out very, I don't want to say quickly, but you can organize yourself very quickly and very fast into what you want to do. And then that once you're like, okay, this looks good. And so then you kind of look at a calendar, you go, whatever. But I think a thing that would help someone get better is just try not to like think about your subject material from the perspective of like, I've got 6 to 8 weeks to teach this material, to preach on this material. Like how much of it, like we don't have to go into like, because even a book of the Bible if you wanted to, you could preach that thing for a year.
Yeah.
You could break it down into all kinds of nuance. But that's not going to help you. Like you want your congregation or the people you're teaching to kind of get two things out of sermons. And that is, what is something practical, obviously, that I'm going to take from this, right? But also you are wanting to increase their biblical literacy. Right? So you're not just wanting to be like, let's read this and what do we learn from it? You're also wanting to actually be like, teach them what the Bible is saying and to be Bible literate, right? So I think just trying to like hone it down to where you're not just like really just kind of narrow it down and think of it. It's like what in this material is going to educate people from a biblical perspective, and then also give them something that the Bible is teaching us. Right? And I think that makes things easier, because sometimes pastors, Bible teachers in general, I've never met a Bible teacher that like comes under time. Like you give them 30 minutes and they're like, I finished in 15 minutes. Never happens. Like if you're teaching the Bible, those guys are usually just very prolific and can just go on and on and on and on. It's just like, no, you gotta try to just, clean it out. It's like weeding out, just really focus in. Like try not to complicate scripture, because there's so much in there that you could literally teach this and teach a whole series, and then in a year come back, teach it again in a very different way. Right. And then you can explore it. So you're not going to get everything. The Bible is very intricate and deep, and you're not going to get everything in there. So
that's true. So you mentioned you were a full-time pastor. Now you're part-time. For someone considering a path in ministry, what advice would you give them? And then in your experience, would you prefer to be full-time? Do you like the part-time where you have a full-time job? Kind of pros and cons of both?
Sure. I think to your first question, what advice would I give? I would do two things. One, serve under somebody. Okay. Like if you want to be a pastor, like don't just go to Bible college and then start pastoring. Like that's a very, I think idealistically you want to just be like, you're on fire. You want to just start, you want to just get out there and hit the streets. And one, that's not smart. And two, there's no practical evidence that works. Right. Everybody in scripture that you see, it was always underneath somebody for a while. Right. And you got to do that. Like go serve at a church or the church you go to. Just go talk to your pastor. Be like, hey, I'm considering pastoral ministry. Can I just work alongside you for like a summer? Can I meet with you once a week or can I get an opportunity to work in, whatever? Can I help you in this? Just whatever. And I think, but just work under someone, serve under someone. Don't think that you're going to be preaching from like main stage, like right off. Like you're going to be preaching to youth You're going to be doing children's church. Like you're going to be doing like Wednesday night Bible study, like, and do those things and do them gladly and do them with integrity, because that's where you're learning. Like you are here to learn, right?
Yeah.
So serve under somebody. And two, like if at all possible, I know it's not possible for everybody, but just do your best to get some level of like Bible education. You know, go to seminary, go to Bible college. It could be a small Bible college. It doesn't have to be, you know, Fuller or anything like that. Like it can be a small Bible college, but and I think the reason I say that is because Bible college is going to break down these little nuances of biblical interpretation. I mean, I know when I went to Bible college, like I had a class on preaching that literally taught me how to preach. Right? I had a class on church leadership, you know, church administration. Like there's we had a class on biblical, you know, expository biblical interpretation, Old Testament history, New Testament history. Like there's so many aspects to being a pastor. Besides, like we talked about earlier, besides preaching. Like just because you're a good preacher and just because you did youth ministry for, you know, 6 years doesn't mean you're ready to be a pastor. Like, so go, I mean, to whatever degree and whatever level you can get to Bible college, go to Bible college, go to, you know, a good Bible college and get that education and then serve under somebody. Like that's, I can't tell that enough, like serve under somebody. When I was in church, like I was a worship leader for a long time. And then when I wanted to get into pastoral ministry, I just started working with our pastor and I started helping him write sermons, and he would let me preach in those sermons. And I started we would come up with the sermon series together, and he would have me do a lot of that. Like, well, read the, you know, how do you want to break this down? Like study it and let me know what you want to do and how we can do this. And, but just, like I've had the opportunity to preach and great opportunities to preach, but I've also like been invited to a church. Like, will you come? They might invite, so they want somebody to go preach to them. And so they'll send me and I'll go, and there's 10 people in there, you know, and you're gonna be like, man, there's only 10 people here. It's like, no, there's 10 people here. Like, do it, man. Like preach the word. And that's part of it, right? You gotta serve under someone. You gotta serve under someone for a while. Like, don't think, give it a summer and then you're ready. You know what I mean? Give it a few years, you know?
And I think it's also important to get that feedback now from whoever you're serving under, whether it be preaching or leading or whatever work you're partaking. They're able to tell you, hey, you know, maybe do this different or try this, or, you know, I would have done this.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. So the other thing I was bringing up was, so if you can give kind of like the pros and cons of when you were full-time, and then kind of pros and cons of you being now, you have a full-time job and then you're part-time pastor.
I think the reality is that, I mean, obviously being a full-time pastor is ideal, right? Because you literally just have the full time to commit to what you want to do. And there's a lot of possibilities that can live within that. But I think the reality is that while these big, large churches are highly visible, those churches are not the normal. Like the normal church are going to be these small community churches, small rural churches, or even if you live in the city, like sort of these smaller pocket churches. And some of the churches just don't have the ability to pay their pastors, right? They should. I mean, I guess if they really wanted to, like they could work towards that, but that's just not always the reality. And so a lot of pastors do have to be bivocational, and they have to work and do that. And that is more of the reality than, going to work for church and being on staff. And, it also depends on where you live, right? Because if you live here in Texas, I mean, there might be more opportunity for that than if you live in Washington or something. But, I think there's definitely a lot of good things with being a full-time pastor. You've got more time, you got more of your energy that you can commit to something. And because you have more time, you have more space to do bigger things, to plan, to be strategic about things. But, with that time and availability, it increases the expectation. You know what I mean? So like if you're a full-time pastor, then people will want to reach you 8 hours a day, right? You're available, right? You can come in the morning, so that expectation to be available, that expectation to, I guess lack of a better word would be, to perform, to like get things done, right? It's like, hey, you work full time, like why can't you get it done, right? So same as any job, right? If you were part time at a job, hey, you only got so many hours, okay, you got done what you got done. You're full time, like you've been here all day, man. Like we need to see some progress. So that expectation does go up, right? And I think there's definitely, but being a part-time pastor in the, opposite of, you have a limited time, right? You can only get so much done that you can get done. Where I'm at as a part-time pastor, I think what it has forced me to do, which I would consider a huge plus, is that it has forced me and church leadership to create a culture where there's shared responsibility. Because if you're a full-time pastor, then like you should be doing everything. Like you should be able to get it, right? You should be able to plan our services and meet with people and prepare board stuff and do announcements and get things finished and whatever. And when you're a part-time pastor, like obviously you only have so much time. So it creates and it forces the requirement to be like, hey, if we're going to do this, we got to share it. Right. And so elders share that responsibility, ministry leaders share that responsibility. And those things happen. And so that's happened with us as a church. I think it's given us that thing. But I think I would say that there's definitely sometimes a desire in me that I just wish I had more time. Like I wish I could commit more time to maybe some strategic planning or more time to meet with our ministry leaders and say, I can meet with you more often and lead in that way. So you have to be creative and you have to like kind of figure out what you're doing. But, if you can work for a church and they can pay you, you can be on staff. That's great, especially if they can pay you well, because you can take care of your family and you can do full-time ministry, but if you're a part of a church or if you see a need at a church and you feel drawn to them and you just know they're not going to be able to pay you, that's not it shouldn't be a deal breaker. You should be able to be like, you know what, let me take care of my family, with this, and I will commit my time to the church in this way.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Earlier you mentioned pastoring can be very isolating. Are there any other misconceptions about being a pastor?
The misconception that pastors have the answer.
Okay.
We don't. You know what I mean? Like there's times when people come to talk and they're just like, yeah, I got this going on and this is happening and I just know what to do. Then they look at you and you're just like, sorry you're going through that, man. Like you can tell me all about it, but like I don't have an answer for you, And, I can point you to somebody who might have the answer, I mean, it's like, we go to church and somebody comes in there and they're having financial struggles and they lost their job and I pray with them and stuff. And it's like, yeah, and our we're going to have to really cut our budget and things like that. So right, go talk to that guy. I mean, he's really good at his budgeting. He does it for a living. Like you should talk with him. He could probably help you out, get you on a good plan that can make your current income work, But yeah, it's like, I think sometimes people come to talk to the pastor and stuff and they want an answer. And I'm just like, I don't have the answer. Like I can tell you how to find the answer, you know what I mean? But I don't have it for you. And a lot of pastoring in terms of like the connection that you have with people, most of it is just like listening in time. It's not even if people are seeking you for counsel, you can counsel them and you can give them spiritual guidance. You can tell them what the scripture says. You can tell them what God would expect for them. You can tell them, hey, I've seen this before. It's not a good idea for you to be doing that. You can give them that admonition, but ultimately, people are going to have to do certain things. And I think the leaning on the pastor too much, I think that's a misconception, is like, oh, we're here, we're going to be able to help you with everything. It's like, there's very little that we're actually going to be able to like do for you.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to help you in a certain way. And then you go from there.
Yeah.
Or you go to the professionals. I think a big misconception too, and I think this is important, is that people what you see your pastor as in terms of like, this is the pastor of the church, and having an unfair expectation that your pastor is not just a normal person. Like this is a normal dude, right?
Yeah.
And you might, like specifically speaking, like you might catch him on a day where he's not in a good mood.
Yeah.
And he might not be very nice. And you're trying. I mean, you're the pastor. Like you kind of have to like, but I mean, like I can't always be like just say, yeah, of course, whatever you need. Sometimes I'd be like, hey, it's not a good time. Like you're gonna have to call me tomorrow, right? And and then we're like, well, I'm supposed to call my pastor and talk to him and be like, I can't do that right now. They're pastors are normal dudes, normal people that have problems in their marriage. They fight with their wife, they yell at their kids, they make mistakes, they do things that you do. They sometimes they mismanage their money, sometimes they mismanage their time. They have bad relationships with people. Sometimes they're going to hurt your feelings, or they're going to like, I think if you have a friend and that friend is mean to you, or they're kind of rude to you, and you would be like, man, you would talk to that friend and then you'd kind of reconcile and you could keep being friends. I think that your pastor does that to you and you're like, I can't come to this church anymore. And it's like, this is just a person, right? They made a mistake. They said something kind of maybe not nice to you. They didn't mean to. There could have been a lot of things there. Just talk to them, and just, they're normal people with normal things, and that's
That's good. I like that one. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't see that side of their pastors, right? They don't see he's just a normal person trying to love the church and lead the church. How do you see the role of the church evolving in today's world?
There's, it has to evolve. I think we want to see the church. When I say we, I say pastors. Pastors want to see the church moving forward, right? But I think because pastors are leaders, and typically the kind of people that pastor a church are what's a nice way to say this? Pastors are typically people that like being the guy, right? It's like, oh, he's our leader. He's the guy. He's the one in charge. He's the, we like to be the guy, right? And that can get in the way sometimes. It's a hard battle to not be like, to put yourself aside, to humble, to be serving. It's always a constant reminder, right? And but I think that pastors kind of straddle this line of like wanting to see the church move forward and wanting to see the church grow and stuff like that. But a lot of times that has to come at the expense of yourself. Right. It's like either it might be something as much as like, oh, it's time to hand the church over, or it might just be like we got a message that the church really needs to hear, and I'm not the one to preach that. Somebody else is going to bring that message. It's not going to be me, right? I'm not going to be the leader in this place. I'm not going to be the one in charge. But I see the church and the role in the church evolving in that, like, it's not, it was never meant to be the top like position. You know what I mean? The way that the early church was set up, there was never this like structure of like, okay, when you have a church, like you got a pastor and he's the top guy. And then you got this and that and everything. Everything that Paul did in the New Testament when he would establishing churches, it was about establishing elders and like a team of elders and people that were all qualified to do a lot of the work and to share the work. And pastors has changed, I think, in Western culture. When I say Western, I mean like this side of the, in American culture, the pastor has become much like the CEO or much like the boss or like the runner of a company, the entrepreneur, And so that's why it attracts guys like that, they like being the guy, they're the go-getters, they're visionary. But it can't live in that model because it was never intended to be. So the church benefits from people like that. It benefits from having pastors that are charismatic and they're going and they're moving and they push forward. But it can't stay in that model because then it's just going to become a business, which in a lot of ways, there are some churches that's all they are. And you can see that people can sense it when they go in. But it has to evolve away from, I think, where it's like the pastor model. I had a recently I was attending this conference that I was at, and the guy that was talking about he was emphasizing the role of elders. And he said that the church has to move away from being a church that is like pastor led and board driven, right? So you have the church board that drives the church forward. They make all the decisions, and the pastor leads. He's the leader. And it has to change to a model that is elder led and pastor driven. So you got one guy that's like giving the ideas and like, hey, what if we did that? And he's kind of reaching and he's kind of doing stuff, but it's elder led. Like it's this group of people that are saying, okay, great, we see that, so let's do that, right? Or let's go this direction, let's go that direction. And it's not just one guy that's like driving and leading and everything, right? And it was never meant to be that model. Which is a very, it doesn't do me as a pastor any good to say that that's where it needs to go.
Yeah.
But I think that's just the reality.
Yeah. Well, I think like 1 Corinthians 12 that talks about, the body and different parts. And I think it's important for a pastor to recognize the importance of empowering and delegating and, everyone, like I have my role, right? And you have your role, and you have your role, and everyone contributes, right? We're the local church was created to contribute to the body, right? And they were uniquely gifted, right? No matter what position or how insignificant you might think, I think the pastor needs to recognize and empower the different parts of the body. Like you said, right? Instead of like this, I'm the boss and, I'm in charge.
And everybody just goes where I say go.
Yeah. I think it's, what legacy do you hope to leave behind as a pastor?
There is a quote, I don't know who said it, but it's one of my favorite things. And then it is that leadership, like true leaders are men who, and it says men, but be anybody.
Yeah.
But like true good leaders are people who plant trees whose shade they will never sit under.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I think that's the legacy. It's like, it's not about having a plaque on the wall that says Michael Mancha was the pastor of this church from this time to this time.
Yeah.
It's about doing things in the church so that when I'm gone, the church either still does those things or has grown from that, or that caused another thing to that, and then that caused a bigger thing. It's just the time that I served as the pastor of the church, we did X, Y, Z, and hopefully that when I'm no longer the pastor of the church, those things grow from that. Either they evolve from that into something better and new. It may have been this, and now it's even a better thing. Or it sparks a new interest, it sparks a new growth, it sparks something. It just does something, But I don't have any desire in my heart to be like remembered as like one of the old, who's one of the previous pastors, and he's like that kind of legacy. Yeah. It's just like, hey, the work that we did here, as long as the work that we're doing is the kind of work where, like, yeah, you're planting trees, right? I'll never see that tree grow. But, if we just came to use the tree analogy, if we just came into the proverbial church landscape and we just like admired the grass and cut it, you know, well, in 20 years, it's still just going to be grass. Yeah. Right? But if we came here and said, let's plant trees, let's do this, and then our time is over, we're gone. At some point, there's going to be something that grew out of that. I think that's the important thing. It's just as a pastor, like just do the work for the church that's going to be good for the church. I also had somebody tell me one time, the last church that I was at, that was a pastor at, when I was getting ready to leave the church, we were moving on to a new role and kind of preparing the church for me leaving and stuff like that. And I was having all these feelings about like, oh, like this, like, what are they going to remember me? Did I even matter here? Like, did I make a difference? And then a pastor friend of mine reminded me, like, this isn't your church. Never was your church. Yeah. Right. This church belongs to Christ. Christ is the head of the church, not you. So good job. that while you're here, you did great things. You helped the church a lot.
Yeah.
And you're going to go from this place, and Christ is still going to remain the head of this church and is going to do with it what he designs for her.
Yeah.
And that's the model. Right?
Yeah.
And so that was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess you're right. You know,
so you're just here to do your part.
You're here to do the work that God gave you to do while you were here. And then that's it. This is not your church. This is his, you know, and he will do with it. And if he put you here, do what you need to do and then move on to that next thing. And he will continue to do what's necessary.
Yeah, very cool. So anyone listening that wants to become a pastor, can you share a little bit about how being a pastor has changed your life personally?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my dog.
More opinions. No, I think being a pastor, I think it has created in me an understanding of people. Like it is, I think it has fundamentally changed my life in the sense that it has given me, it has forced me to really like see and listen to people.
Yeah.
Like, and to truly see them and hear them and love them, you know, and not have an agenda with people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's times when even as a pastor, like I'm listening to someone or I'm visiting with someone or someone is sharing something with me and I'm almost listening them to think about what I can do with them or do for them or help them. And in the times where I've done that, it's just been a big like failure, like just fall on my face. Like it was just like, I walk away from it feeling like that was stupid. That was all about me. Right. Yeah. And I think being a pastor has really helped me to kind of just be like, to see people and to see that people want to be heard. They want to be listened to. They want to be known. They want to be, they just want to be seen. And, and that's it. And so like, I think in every aspect of my life, like that's kind of like the perspective that I have now is like, who are you as a person? Why are you the way you are? Why do you think the way you think? Why do you feel the way you feel? Why do you live the way you live? You know, and just wanting to like know that about people. I wish I could say that, it's changed my life. It's made me a stronger believer. It's made me see God more. So no, it's just, and I think I guess that's true because by just seeing people and knowing people, that has felt more Christ-like than how well I can preach to people or how well I can know the scripture. Yeah. Like it feels more Christ-like to just see a person and just be like, I just want to know who you are. I just want to know what you are as a person and know that you matter. You matter to me, you know? So
it's funny. I keep referencing the same interview, but when I was interviewing the firefighter, that's one of the things that I asked about. I talked about impact because, he's fighting fires and, he's giving medical attention. So I talked about what's maybe one of the most meaningful interactions he's had as a firefighter. And he said the ability to be kind to someone.
Yeah.
He's like, one time we made a call and this person had I guess passed out and they just needed to be hydrated. He's like, so I sat with them, I gave them a bottle of water and then we checked their vitals, make sure they were okay. And they were fine. He goes, but I just got to sit there and have a conversation and like give them water. Like you just need water, man.
Simple.
Like you're just, you're dehydrated. And they just talked and they had a nice little moment and then he left.
He was fine.
And he said that those small interactions mean a lot to him.
Yeah.
And he's a believer and he just, he loves serving and loving people. But I just thought it was interesting that, like pastors, right? We see the preaching and the teaching and the stage. And firefighters, we see the, the fighting and the gear and the impact of kindness and connecting with people is kind of what, is what.
I mean, that's very true. Like pastors are, the call that Jesus gives to us is to love the Lord your God and to love people, right? To love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah. And pastors are not, there's not any like added thing to
but
them
if you're
for
a pastor,
that. But if you're a pastor, also no, it's the same.
It's the same calling.
It's the same thing. You have a different level of visibility, as much as anybody else in any other role or any other place. But it's just, that's all it comes down to.
So if I want to be a pastor, you obviously, your husband, your father. Is there anything in that aspect? Are there considerations? Like I'm a pastor and I have a family. Someone that wants to go into ministry full time, or is there some advice you can give on that end?
Just that you're not going to be able. I think this is obvious. I mean, a lot of pastors have struggled because of that, and so it seems obvious, like, oh yeah, of course, absolutely. But it's harder that I think. It's just that you're never going to be able to do anything in ministry to any level of success if, just like the Bible says, if your home is not in order. And it doesn't mean like, well, my kids got in a fight at school, so I'm disqualified from being a pastor now. No, it's not mean. It just means that that your home is your first priority. Right? And so, like, when I became a pastor, with the church, I set expectations and boundaries with the church that were determined by my family, right? And so it's not like I don't force my family to live by the boundaries of what the church needs. Like, I tell the church, like, I'm not available on this day. I'm sorry. You're just gonna have to find somebody else to talk to. If you gotta talk to me, you're gonna have to wait. Otherwise, go find some more friends. Like, I'm not your only friend. Like, I am the pastor, but like, you're gonna have to make connection with other people. You're gonna have to have other ways. So like, but just having those boundaries that are determined by your family, right? By what your wife wants. My wife and I, we have a rule. I think you guys have the same rule. Is that if it's a no for one, it's a no for both, right? If there's something that I really want to do, and my wife's like, I just don't think that's a good idea. I can't be like, well, you know what? For the church. It's like, no, if it's a no for one, it's a no for both. My wife knows everything, hears everything. Then I made sure that the church knew that I don't pastor the church, we pastor the church. And so she will know everything. She will hear everything. She will understand all the aspects of what we do. And if the church's desire is for that just to be mine, it's not her business, then we're not the right people for this place. It's got to be the both of us. And she gladly does that. She doesn't have any interest in like jumping in there with me. But she's like, no, I gotta know. She wants to know. She wants to hear all of it. And so I think that's the thing, is if you have a family and you have a marriage, like, it's cliche to say, make sure you put your marriage is your first ministry, is what people say. That's a cliche thing to say, but I think you kind of have to take it seriously and not be so flippant about it and be like, no, definitely. No, but actually put things in place that show and prove that the decisions that are made as a pastor are often predetermined by both the relationship with your wife and the dynamic of your family.
It's good. All right, I will end with this question. What message would you like to share with anyone watching this interview who might be curious about faith or ministry?
I would say don't take it lightly. Like, if ministry is something you want to go into, then really look into it. Like, really try it, right? Like, if you just feel like God is calling you to any level of ministry and you're a part of a church, then just find someone in your church and just dive in, right? If it's just like, you know what, I heard that they need help in youth ministry, like, just go help, right? If that means you're just like, you're running to get pizzas on youth night, or you're helping chaperone or whatever, just go and do it, because a lot of ministry is service, right? When you talked about, like, you asked the question about like, what's something that people don't know that the pastor does. I mean, I'm pastor of the church, and I still help clean the church, still throw trash out, still straighten out chairs, still pick up coffee cups after the church, still lock up the church. Like, there's nothing in the church that is outside of my role, right? And a lot of church is ministry. So, I mean, service. A lot of ministry is service. And so if you want to be in ministry at any level, just go serve. Like, go serve in the food, go like greet, go prep the coffee, go do anything, right? Because you're going to very quickly find out whether you want to do this or not. Like, there's nothing that says, do I want to be in ministry? Then than setting out 50 chairs and tables, right? And then cleaning up, right?
Yeah.
Or vacuuming a whole sanctuary. Like you're going to find out, like, if you find yourself like doing these things and you're just, I love what I'm doing, then like, I think you're called for ministry.
Yeah.
And everybody's called for ministry, but like specifically like church ministry.
Yeah.
And then, you know, but if you do that and you're just like, you know what, like I love serving my church. I love being available. I love, you know, when they need me, but you know, this is about as much as I can do.
Yeah.
Then it might not be something that you're called to. And if it is, if you do feel that, then start to take those next steps forward.
Yeah.
If you feel it's pastoral ministry, look for Bible college, talk to your pastor, like get involved with like what's going on with it so that you can take the next step in figuring out, is it something I want to do? Is it something I want to do? Is it something I want to do? And eventually I think God is you're going to get to a place where you're just like, all right, God, I hear you pretty clearly now. And so this is what we're going to do. So, yeah.
I like it, man.
Yeah.
Any last words or advice?
No, I would just say this is a little self-serving, but if you belong to a church and you serve that church and you worship there and you're part of the community and you love that church and you love your pastor, like just be kind to your pastor, man. Like they deal with a lot, they do a lot. Yeah. Unless you go to a mega church, they probably don't get paid very well. You know what I mean? So and they probably do a lot more work than they're supposed to be doing. Right? Yeah. So just be kind to them, be nice, support them, ask them how they're doing, you know, take them out, buy them coffee, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I like how you said, you know, they're just normal people, you know, doing their part. Very cool. Well, thanks for tuning in to My Line of Work. If today's story inspired or intrigued you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Just subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. I want to thank Michael for sharing his experiences as a pastor. If you have any questions on ministry, comment below, send us a message. I'll get them to him, and we'll try to answer those questions. If there's a career you're curious about, drop it in the comments below. We'd love to feature it. And that's it. Hasta la próxima.